All right, guys, are there any homework questions before we get started on today's lesson? Any questions so far? Yes.
How are you?
I'm good.
You feeling better?
I am. So, over the last 3 months, for some reason, been having almost like, if you've ever seen kind of lines, kind of looks like a lens flare out of this eye, and then end up getting headaches. Had it happen yesterday or Friday morning, decided I probably need to go see the doctor after 3 months, and finally got an appointment, got in to see that. So it looks like literally if you've ever had glare where the sun flashes off something, just sitting there. Most likely, probably it's migraines, but we'll see. So, but other than that, nothing too bad. Hopefully, y'all took advantage of the time Friday to work on the assignments. If you did, awesome. If not, you'll get one more day before the test. So, and that'll be 3 days or 4 days before the test. So, it'll be a little bit before then. Now, what we're looking at today is midpoint and kind of segment bisectors, or midpoint and distance. Now I was able to go back in and fix the slides, so now that they hopefully look a little bit nicer than they did last week, look a little bit cleaner, easier to read. Now the first thing we're going to talk about is midpoint. The midpoint of a segment is the point that divides the segment into two congruent segments. So a point's a midpoint if it divides it into two congruent segments. And we went over last week that if two segments are congruent, it means that they have the same length. They have the same measure. Questions about a midpoint? A segment bisector is a point, ray, line segment, or plane that intersects a segment at its midpoint. So a segment bisector cuts a line segment in half. It bisects it. Because if we looked at the word bisect, because when we talk about just kind of the roots, sect is to cut, and bi is two. It's cut in half. It's cut into two parts. You bisect it. So the CD is a segment bisector, line CD is a segment bisector that cuts AB in half. It cuts it into two congruent parts, two equal parts. Questions on this here? We good with this here so far? So let's look at the first example problem here. The skateboard. In the skateboard design, VW bisects line segment XY at point T. So our segment bisector would be point T. If we were asked to find the segment bisector or name the segment bisector, for this one here, it would be point T. And they tell us that XT is 39.9 centimeters. Find XY. So we want to find the length of the whole thing. Well, point T is the midpoint. It bisects it in half, yes? So we know that TX is going to be the same as TY, yes? So what's the length of TY? Because we know these two lengths are the So to find the total, we can add these two lengths together because those two lengths will add together to give us the whole. 9 plus 9 is 8, carry the 1. 9 and 1 is 10, plus 9 is 19. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So XY is equal to 8 centimeters. And that's it. A little bit, yes. Questions on this here? We good with this here so far? Yeah. Identify the segment bisector of PQ, then find PQ. So what is cutting line segment PQ in half? Because we do have M, but it's also what? So the segment bisector is ray MN. Now we don't have to write the word ray because of the symbol we put above MN tells us that it is a ray. So on the homework, when it asks for the segment bisector, I'm just looking for this. You don't have to rewrite out segment bisector. So we need to at least identify what the segment bisector is. So here it's ray MN. So it cuts it in half. So if we, any other questions on that before we look at the next part? So now we want to find the length of PQ, the whole thing, yes? Well, if MN is a segment bisector, it means the distance from P to M is the same as what? The distance from from M2, which will be 1 and 7/8. Yes. So what we're going to do is add 1 and 7/8 plus 1 and 7/8 to each other because we're going to add those two lengths together. Now there's different ways we can do this. One way is we can convert both of those 7/8 to decimals, add them together, and go from there. The second way is, well, we can add the whole numbers together. Well, 1 plus 1 is? Now, since the denominators are already the same, we can add the numerators. 7 plus 7 is? So we get this here. Now, we do need to reduce that fraction because we do have it as a mixed number. We don't have it as an improper fraction because 14 is bigger than 8, yes? So we can pull 8 out once, which will turn the 2 into a 14 minus 8 is? Yes? It is 6. So we have 3 and 6/8. Now will 6/8 reduce? So 3 and 3/4. And that'd be the final answer. Or we could have plugged this into a calculator and it would have given us the answer. So either way works. Any questions on this here? We good with this here? Yes. We ready for the next one? Huh? Right by the door. Now, if we look at the next one here, we want to identify the segment bisector of PQ, line segment PQ, then find the length of PQ. So what's our segment bisector? M. What is M? So the segment bisector is just point M. Point M. That's going to be our segment bisector. Well, since it is a segment bisector, it's the midpoint, which means this other length is 2 and 2/7. Because it cuts it in half. It cuts the whole line in half, so each of the two halves have to be the same. Well, to find the whole length, well, we can add these two together. Because we can add the whole numbers. 2 plus 2 is 4. And since the denominators are the same for our two fractions, we can add the numerators, the tops of the fractions. 2 plus 2 is 4. So PQ, I didn't write this one out on the last one, we can say is 4 4/7. And that's it. Questions on this here? We like this so far? We're ready for the next one. Point M is the midpoint of V line segment VW. Find the length of line segment VM. So this time, do we have any lengths given? Do we actually have a number? No. We have two expressions because we have the expression 4x minus 1 and the expression 3x plus 3. Yes? Okay. For this first one here, we're going to go through and do this pretty much as mathematically as we can get this. Now, by definition, point M is the midpoint, yes? If it's a midpoint, it means it cuts it into two congruent segments, yes? So by definition, we're saying that VM, line segment VM, is congruent to line segment MW. This is just by definition of a midpoint. Really, because since M is a midpoint, it bisects it, it cuts it in half. So we have this here. Well, from what we learned yesterday, if two segments, line segments, are congruent, it means that the length of VM is equal to the length of MW. So we said the two segments are congruent, which means that their lengths are the same. Well, what is the length of VM? Okay, I'm going to replace it with that. What's the length of MW? Hopefully this should look familiar, yes? I don't think you want Miss Kendall to hear that, because I think y'all just spent a good amount of time solving these. So, this point here, we just want to get the value of x. We want to find out what x is. Now, the whole point of this here, because again, we want to find what? The length of VM. We want to find this length, yes? If I know what x is, I can plug it back in, and we can find this length. That's the whole goal. So we got all the way to this here. Now we need to get x by itself. So we need to move the x's from one side to the other. So what can we do? How can we do that? Three, 3x. Because we have two different 3's. Now if I subtract 3x from this side here, what's 3x minus 3x? 0. Okay. Well, what I do to one side, we have to do to the other. Now 4x minus 3x gives me minus 1 is equal to 3. Okay. Is x by itself? So we need to add 1, because again, we need to get the variable by itself, because negative 1 plus 1 is 0, which tells us x is equal to . Any questions on this here? Yeah, the printer didn't print well. It should be plus.
Yeah, I see it. There's like a little.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm going to have to redo some of these because the printer did not print it well. So, any questions on this so far? Did we answer the question? What did it ask? Find the length of is VM 4. Now, what did it tell us that VM was? VM is 4x minus 1, yes? All we did was find the value of x. We never actually found its length. So to find the length of VM, we need to plug 4 back in for x. So we'd have 4 times 4 minus 1. Yes. So we have this here, yes? Is all of that a number? 4 times 4 minus 1? You can plug it in. I mean, I can plug in a calculator, 4 parentheses, 4, close parentheses, minus 1, hit enter, and it'd tell me the answer, yes? If we did this by hand, 4 times 4 is? So VM is, and that's the answer. Questions on this here? What would happen if I had plugged 4 into 3x plus 3? Yes, because 4 times 3 is? We get 15. That's nice because if we're not sure about an answer, we can always check it. Because again, since we're talking about midpoints, these two links have to be the. So if you plug your answer, your value of x into both and get two different answers, we know either the calculations were wrong or the value of x is wrong because these two should give us the same value. Does that make sense? All right. Any other questions on this here? Are you ready for another one? Identify the line segment, or identify the segment bisector of line segment PQ, then find MQ. So what is cutting this line in half? Line L. Line L. Now it is bisecting it at point M, but how many points do we need to name a line? 2. Do we have 2? No. So we have to go with this here. If we had another point on that line, we could use it, but since we only have one, we have to use line L. Okay? Any questions on this so far? So we know it bisects the line, yes? So we know that line segment PM is going to be congruent to what? Line segment MQ. So those two line segments are going to be equal, yes? We could go and do the same thing we did on the last one, or really what are we saying? We're saying that 5x minus 3 is equal to what? Yes, 5x minus 3 is equal to 11 minus 2x. We can go on and start with this here. We don't have to go through that entire process every single time. Let me rephrase that. I'm not going to make you go through that process every single time. Because again, if I want to find the length of MQ, we need to find the value of x to be able to plug back in. So we're solving for x first. Now looking at this here, what do we need to do first to get x by itself? Because there's many different things we can do. What do y'all want to do first? Because we can minus, we could add. We can add 3 to both sides. Because it doesn't matter what we do first, we just got to pick one and get the variables on the same side and everything else on the other. Because here, negative 3 plus 3 will cancel, telling us that we just have 5x on the left-hand side is equal to. Well, here we would add 11 and 3 because they're like terms. 11 plus 3 is minus 2x. Almost. So is the 2x positive or negative? Negative, so we need to do the opposite operation. So we would add. Because negative 2x plus 2x, negative 2 plus 2 is 0, which leaves us with 14 on the right-hand side. 5x plus 2x is? All right. Are all the x's on the same side? Okay. Is x by itself? No, so what do we need to do? By? 14 divided by 7 is? And that's our answer, yes? Okay, we got to plug it back in, yes? Which one do we plug it back into? 11 minus 2x. So we have 11 minus 2 times 2. And again, at this point, we could type this into a calculator. We can type in 11 minus 2 times 2 and get our answer. Or if we did this by hand, 2 times 2 is 4. And 11 minus 4 is 7. So MQ is 7. And if we did the other way, 5 times 2 minus 3, well, 5 times 2 is 10, and 10 minus 3 is still 7. They both give us the same answer. Questions on this here? Not too bad so far. Questions? Okay. We ready for the next one? Identify the segment bisector of RS, then find RS. So what's our segment bisector? Line in. So for some of y'all that feel comfortable with this, go on and start solving it, see if you can get the answer. Now at this point here, we know that this whole line's cut in half, so the two segments would be equal to each other, or that 4x plus 3 is going to equal 6x minus 12. Questions on this so far? Now we just need to solve for the value of x. So what do we want to do first? Yeah. We can minus 3 from both sides. Because 3 minus 3 is 0, telling us that 4x is equal to 6x minus 15. If you added or subtracted something differently, that's fine. Because again, we could have added 12 to both sides to start off with, or we could have subtracted 6x from both sides, or we could have subtracted 4x. Any one of those would still work. Now at this point here, we'll need to subtract 6x from both sides. And that'll tell us that negative 2x is equal to negative. And last but not least, we'll need to divide both sides by. And if we divide both sides by negative 2, like 7.5? No, exactly 7.5. Yeah, no, yeah. Did you add 15 first or subtract 4x? Yeah, so you added 12 first, and then subtracted 4x and divided by 2. Yeah, that's the exact same process. Yeah, because again, when we do our first main step here, where I subtracted 3, we could have added 12. Or instead of subtracting 3, I could have subtracted 4x from both sides. Or instead of doing any of that, I could have subtracted 6x. We'll still get to the same answer. So the way that we do it's all depending on how you want to start. No, we'll finish them tomorrow. So what do we need to do next? We need to plug 7.5 back in, yes? So we can do 4 times 7.5, yes? Plus 3. And again, at this point here, we can plug this onto the calculator. We don't have to do this by hand. Now 4 times 7.5, well, it's 7.5 plus 7.5. Would be 15, yes? 30 and 15 and 15 is 30. Because we have it 4 times. Plus 3. Questions? Yes? On how we got 30? So we're taking 7.5 and multiplying it by 4, yes? So 7.5 plus 7.5. Is it times 2, which is 30, or sorry, not 30, 15. And we have how many of those groups? To make 4? Yeah.
So is that RS because it says find RS instead of.
Right, so 33 is what? Is it RS? No, this is 4 times x plus 3, yes? So we only found from here to here, which is, what's this distance? So, yeah, it's based off of, it's recognizing different, yep. Questions on this here? Now this is something to pay attention to on this assignment and this test is when we start talking about these here, what is it asking for? Is it asking for half the segment or the whole segment? Here it's asking for the whole, so if you gave me 33, that's technically not right because that's not what it's asking for. It's asking. Well, this part of it would be wrong because you got this right. So you got, again, I do partial credit just like Ms. Kendall. You would get 75% of this because you got 1 for doing your work. You got 1 for doing your work, 1 for X, or so 2/3, or 1 for naming the bisector because it did ask that. And then the only thing you missed was the final answer. So you'd get, say, 3 out of the 4 points. Okay. Any other questions on this here? Midpoint formula. The midpoints, or the coordinates of the midpoint of a segment, are the average of the x coordinates and of the y coordinates of the endpoints. If A is x1, y1, and B is x2, y2, are endpoints in a coordinate plane, then the midpoint M of line segment AB has these coordinates here. Add the x values together, divide by 2. Add the y values together and divide by 2. And that is your midpoint. And we'll be basing this for the next few here off of this equation. Because this here is just the formula. So x1 plus x2, the 2 endpoints x values added together and divided by 2 gives you the x value of the midpoint.
So this is just graph.
Plugging it in.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense.
And all the stuff we've been doing so far, it's been on a line. It's just a straight line. We don't have 2 dimensions. Now we have 2 dimensions. So when we look at this first one here, wow. Well, this is the same thing. I'm just marveling at the difference in quality. I don't think anybody noticed. Ready? A little bit of a change. So what we're looking at this one here, we want to find the midpoint. We want to find the midpoint. Yes. Okay. Yes. So for this here, we're just finding the midpoint. You're not having to graph it. You're not having to do any of that. And the midpoint is just this definition. All right? So to find the x value of the midpoint, we're adding the 2 x values together and dividing by 2 to find the x value of the midpoint. what are the two x values for our two endpoints? R and S. So one of them is 1, and the other is 4. So if we're given the two endpoints here, the endpoints of RS, R is 1, -3, S is 4, 2. Find the coordinates of the midpoint. And again, to find the midpoint, given the endpoints, we add the two x values together and divide by 2. We add the two y values together and divide by 2. So the two x values are 1 and 4. 1 plus 4 is? Now, 5 divided by 2 is? So the x value of the midpoint is? 2.5.
So would you even have to do the next note that's like what are the midpoints?
The y value may or may not be the same. It could be the same, but it doesn't have to be. So any questions on how we found x, the x value of the midpoint? So what are the two y values? -3 plus 2 is? -1 divided by 2 is? Now, if you wanted to, left it as fractions, you could have left it as a fraction. We don't have to convert it to a decimal if we don't want to. I will take either form because 5/2 and 2.5 are the same thing. 1/2, -1/2, and -0.5 are the same thing, yes? I will take either one. Questions on this here? This is the last one we'll look at today. Yes, make sure to keep track of them because we will be using them tomorrow. And you'll need them for your homework because they do have the homework assigned, the pages in the back. Now again, we're finding the midpoint given the two endpoints. And again, to find the x value of the midpoint, we add the two x values of the endpoints together and divide by 2. A and B are the endpoints. So what are our x values for the endpoints? What are the y values of the endpoints? So we'll find x first. 1 plus 7 is? 8 divided by 2. So the x value of the midpoint is 4. Now I need to find the y value of the midpoint. So 2 plus 8 is? 10 divided by 2 is? And that is it.
So anytime it's a decimal, we can keep this fraction.
Yes.
Okay.
You can leave it as a decimal or fraction.
Not
Reduce.
yeah.
I will take it in any form as long as it is the same number.
Okay. Because that just makes it easier to put a decimal.
Yeah, because say -3/2, I'll take it as -3/2, -1.5, or -1.5.